Today, everywhere bracing for the possibility of chaos around the 2024 presidential election. That's thanks to an ex-president who launched a coup attempt that ended in violence instead of simply conceding his defeat last time, and is now priming his supporters to be shocked if he loses to a candidate whose entry in the race has thrown him for a loop, a candidate who is beating him in levels of enthusiasm, crowd size, most polls, basically any significant metric for a presidential campaign. The Associated Press reports that one suburban Atlanta county is deploying local sheriffs at early voting locations and panic buttons that connect poll managers to 911. More from that reporting, quote, California's Los Angeles County and Durham County, North Carolina, will have new offices with significant security upgrades for this year's election. They include bulletproof glass, security cameras, and doors that open only with badges. Election workers across the country also will have new procedures for handling mail, including kits of Narcan. That's the nasal spray used for accidental overdoses. In some places, election workers are being trained in de-escalation techniques and how to respond to an active shooter. All of this is in response to the elevated threat level against officials in the wake of the 2020 election and Donald Trump's big lie. Here's Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco yesterday.
We are seeing an unprecedented and extremely disturbing level of threats of violence and violence against public officials, including prosecutors, FBI and other law enforcement agents, judges, and election officials. And this is a point really that we have to underscore. The threats against election officials who are oftentimes simply volunteers. Mm-hmm. These are people who are simply volunteering their time to help all of us undertake the most fundamental right we have, the right to vote, the right that secures all the other rights. These are people who are being threatened simply for doing their job. It's wrong, it's unacceptable, and it should stop. And we are doing everything we can to expose that and hold individuals who are perpetrating those threats accountable.
Here's what happened just this week on this front. NBC News reports this, quote, a senior law enforcement official confirmed that election officials in at least 6 states received packages Monday, but said that so far none of the packages have been found to contain any actual hazardous material. Secretaries of State, Attorney General's offices, and state election offices in Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, Tennessee, Wyoming, and Oklahoma were targeted. The return address identified the sender as the USTEA, U.S. Traitor Elimination Army. That election officials, who, as Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco points out, are just volunteers, that they would be seen as traitors, is cause and effect, right? It's a result of a poison coursing through our democracy, the lie told by Donald Trump that the 2020 election was stolen from him, followed by the lie that this election would be stolen. And the person fomenting that lie is running for the White House again. Because of all of this, election officials are stocking up on Narcan. They have installed bulletproof glass and panic buttons. And in Washington, Democrats are preparing for a possible showdown again on January 6, 2025. Over on Capitol Hill, Politico reports this, that Democrats are, quote, hoping that Kamala Harris will win in November and they'll flip the House too, meaning it would likely be Hakeem Jeffries holding the speaker's gavel as the process of certifying a Harris victory gets underway. It's another scenario that is nagging top House Democrats, that Speaker Mike Johnson might keep his majority as Harris wins and finds himself in a position where he could obstruct the counting of electoral votes and possibly throw the election to the House under the constitutional provisions of the 12th Amendment. Johnson, after all, led House Republicans in filing an amicus brief after the 2020 election, asking the Supreme Court to essentially overturn swing state results. Now he's leading a charge suggesting that undocumented immigrants are voting en masse in what Democrats view as a coordinated effort to sow doubt in the election and lay the groundwork for mischief. Officials bracing for the worst and preparing to defend the way our democracy functions before, during, and after the 2024 presidential election is where we start. In a moment, we'll be joined by the Colorado Secretary of State, Jena Griswold, and voting rights attorney Mark Elias. But we start with New York Times reporter Nick Corsiniti, who's been on this beat for years now. Nick, I feel like you have this extensive and vast body of reporting that takes us through the voter suppression laws, first championed and passed and signed into law in Georgia, through the antics of non-certification, refusing to certify, things being maybe beta tested in Nevada. Take me through the state of play today, as we're now less than 50 days ahead of a general election.
Well, I think, unsurprisingly, we're back in the state that really first caught national attention after the 2020 election, and that's Georgia. The state election board in Georgia, which has recently seen a right-wing 3-2 majority take over the board, is passing new rules that are really concerning not just Democrats, but Republicans and election officials and everyone from the county level to the state level in Georgia that could possibly disrupt the post-election period. We're talking about, the certification, the counting votes, the tallying of votes, and the sending off of electors to the Electoral College. So last month, they passed a rule that would allow for local election officials to take a reasonable inquiry before they certify, which has raised a lot of concerns about whether that could throw certification into question. Now, they're scheduled to meet on Friday, and they have over a dozen new rules and new proposed agenda items. We're less than 50 days out of an election. So Secretary of State Raffensperger's lawyer sent a pretty scathing letter to the state election board saying, you really shouldn't change these rules. The board of every county election official known as Gavrio in Georgia, they sent a similar letter telling them to stop. So we'll see what happens on Friday with the state election board in Georgia. But when it comes to concerns about these new laws, that's where we see the most action, at least right now.
Nick, let me just play some of the sworn testimony from election officials from 2020, at least half of them Republicans like Brad Raffensperger.
It has all gone too far. All of it. Joe diGenova today asked for Chris Krebs, a patriot who ran CISA, to be shot. A 20-something tech in Gwinnett County today has death threats and a noose put out saying he should be hung for treason because he was transferring a report on batches from an EMS to a county computer so he could read it.
And then about 45 minutes later, we started to hear the noises outside my home, and my stomach sunk, and I thought, it's me. And then it's just, we don't know what's going to, the uncertainty of that was what was the fear. Like, are they coming with guns? Are they going to attack my house? I'm in here with my kid.
After the election, my email, my cell phone was doxxed, and so I was getting texts all over the country, and then eventually my wife started getting the text, and hers typically came in as sexualized texts, which were disgusting.
We have various groups come by, and they have had video panel trucks with videos of me proclaiming me to be a pedophile and a pervert and a corrupt and politician, and blaring loudspeakers in my neighborhood, and leaving literature both on my property, but arguing and threatening with neighbors and with myself.
I've lost my sense of security, all because a group of people, starting with number 45 and his ally, Rudy Giuliani, decided to scapegoat me and my daughter, Shay, to push their own lies about how the presidential election was stolen.
I've gained about 60 pounds. I just don't do nothing anymore. I don't want to go anywhere. I second guess everything that I do. It's affecting my life in a major way, in every way. All because of lies. For me doing my job, Same thing I've been doing forever.
So, Nick, I played that because that is what Donald Trump achieved last time without all the rules changes, without the laws being changed in statewide in Georgia and with this election board that you're talking about. Can you give us some specific examples of how the laws have been changed to make that effort easier in 2024 for Donald Trump?
Sure. I think it's important to look at laws like what changed in Georgia, reorienting the state election board to give it more partisan control, taking the authority from local election officials or secretaries of state away and handing it to partisan entities, removing processes that were trusted in the 2020 election, like drop boxes for mail ballots, taking those out of the equation. We've seen that across the country. But what I think is really important to look at now is not just how those laws have changed, but how there's active lawsuits and active litigation to try and further change the rules, and we're less than 50 days out. So there's, been lawsuits by the former president targeting mail ballots in Nevada, ones that could arrive late as allowed by the state law in Nevada. You have a little bit of a grace period, and they're trying to say, no, anything that arrives after Election Day must be thrown out. So that alone could, disenfranchise legal votes under Nevada law. But what it could also do is it puts into question a certain bucket of ballots, for lack of a better word. And then those could be used as, say, evidence in a future challenge. And we're seeing lawsuits already try and establish that there could be, certain questions or numbers of ballots that would indeed throw an election into doubt. At least that argument's being made, and it's certainly being made by the former president on social media. So as we kind of head into this final sprint in the general election, it's these lawsuits that are kind of taking advantage, I think, of some state laws that have been passed, and are going to really put that to the test. And new federal laws that have been tested, like the Electoral Count Reform Act, through the courts in their first general election coming up in November.